Hi there, this is Elise Bennin, your marketing mentor. And this is the podcast for you if and only if you are ready to leave the feast or famine syndrome behind, and I mean for good. Today, I continue my deep dive into email newsletters because they really are the most effective marketing tool for creative professionals. And so I'm talking again with messaging strategist Stacy Eleczko, who 2 years ago realized that if she was going to help her clients with their newsletters, she better have one of her own. That sound familiar? The problem was she had no strategy, no list, no name for the newsletter, no goals, and no plan for what she wanted the newsletter to do for her business. Still, against her better judgment, she launched it anyway. And guess what? It worked anyway. It's brought her new clients, what I call newsletter magic, both confidence in her own work and a deeper understanding of where her gaps are, really important, plus opportunities she wouldn't have known about otherwise, like guesting on podcasts, just like this one. I just love Stacy's story because it proves the point I am constantly making, that you don't need to have all your ducks in a row. You don't need to have everything buttoned up or 5 episodes or issues in a can before you launch it. You don't even need to know what you're going to do. You just need to trust yourself. Trust that you'll figure it out as you go, and then you need to start. So if you're sleeping on your newsletter, then listen and learn. All right. Hello, Stacy. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me back.
Of course. It hasn't been long, actually, but go ahead and introduce yourself first, and then I'll tell the people why we're talking again today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Stacy Eleczko. I'm a messaging strategist and a copywriter. I'm just super excited to be here with you. I work with service-based B2B businesses on helping them figure out how they fit in the market, and then how to just clearly explain that in a way that makes it easy for people to say yes to them.
Awesome. And we're talking today because we're talking about newsletters, number one, because that's one of your marketing tools. So I want to hear all about it. But you are a subscriber to my newsletter, which is my quick tips, which I've been doing for, at least 25 years and longer from my print edition. I've been looking back at back issues that my mother gave me.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Anyway, in a recent issue of mine, you responded and you said, I'm excited to see you encouraging people to start newsletters. Too many people sleep on this, and it's such a great way to nurture people. So let's just start there. Why did you respond with that? And tell us about your newsletter and how it works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I responded because I was one of those people sleeping on newsletters, and everybody kept telling me you should start a newsletter, you should start one. And it's something I often help clients with, the strategy for what their newsletters are going to be or their email marketing. And so actually, it was almost exactly 2 years ago, I was getting ready to go speak at a women's luncheon about their email marketing. And I was like, I cannot go and speak to these women about why they should have newsletters without having one myself. And I was like, I guess it's time to put my money where my mouth is. And so I just launched my newsletter. I wouldn't recommend this, but I did it with no clear goal, no overall plan, no strategy.
I do recommend that.
Okay. I love that. Tell me more.
Because in a way, it links back to the question I was going to interrupt you with, which is, why were you sleeping on it?
Okay. And that, it's funny because what I was going to say next is I generally don't recommend that. That being said, it was sort of like the impetus, right? Of okay, well, now I have to do it. So let me just get started. And I think it was what you said is I was sleeping on it because I didn't know the clear, where am I headed with this? What's the purpose behind this? And doing what I do, I understand how important it is, to have a goal in mind for the pieces that you're writing. What I realized pretty quickly, right, is the people who first subscribed were the people who I was already connected with on LinkedIn, who I already had a relationship with. So, kind of like your biggest fans are the first ones who are going to subscribe anyway. And so it gave me a chance to just start playing around, putting it out there, see what resonated, see what I enjoyed doing. But yeah, I think I put it off because I think I wanted to get it right.
Yeah. I mean, I made you say that because so many people, it will echo in their minds, it will resonate. And I hear it all the time, which is why I don't recommend waiting until you have a goal or a strategy. And, 25, 35 years ago, however long it was when I started mine, I had no idea what I was doing. I just
Right.
knew that I had to stay in touch with people. And so I just put it out there and it evolved, it grew. And that's how I figured out what it needed to be. So it's this catch 22, and maybe you can speak to this also with yourself or your clients, but it's this catch 22 where you can't really know what it's going to be or what it needs to say or be about until you start doing it and start getting feedback and interacting with the actual market, right?
Yeah, it's true. And it's funny because, right, that's a lesson I learned from you very early related to LinkedIn is just sort of go out there and start posting and put it out there and play around and experiment. That's how you figure it out. So I think, what's interesting is with my clients, it's different because it's an outside, like I'm helping them create the strategy. We've just done all of this positioning work, this messaging work. And generally, they're not new in business, right? They just either their brand has evolved or we're doing some foundational pieces they were missing. So when I come in and I support them with content strategy, that's a lot easier to then say, okay, let's take this direction with the newsletter. And of course, they always have to iterate later. But yeah, if it's you on your own, then I like how I've already changed my mind in the first 5 minutes of this. Like, just get started.
I had a client actually this morning and we started talking about the newsletter because she noticed I'd been talking a lot about newsletters and my newsletter. And she said, I hadn't done one yet because I thought I needed to have a few in the can before I actually send one out. What would you say to that?
So I think like ultimately, I would love to say I've got a couple ready to roll, just in case I don't. And I'm going on literally 2 years of sending mine. I've got issue 95 going out next week. Especially in the beginning, you don't always know what it is that you're going to say. So I think, start with what you can start with. One piece of advice I do always give is I know people will say, like, well, I know it's best if I can send it regularly or if I can send it every week or however often they want to do that, but I just don't have the capacity. And I'm like, well, then you start with what you have the capacity to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's a quarterly newsletter or a monthly newsletter, start with that. You can always scale up. But what you don't want to do is start with like thinking that you need to have so many issues and send them out so quickly that you're then creating something unsustainable for yourself.
And just undoable. Like no
Right.
one does that. So then you
Right.
never do it.
That's exactly it. Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I literally just within the past couple of months have gotten to a place where I feel like I finally have a solid strategy in place. But that being said, I don't want people to, I don't want that to be discouraging because yes, I'm 2 years in, but that doesn't mean that in the meantime, my newsletter hasn't been, it's been such a valuable asset for my business. Like I mentioned, it's great for nurturing relationships. And I've definitely, built better relationships with people. I've gotten clients through my newsletters. And there's a lot of things that would have not happened in my business if I didn't have that consistent touch point with my clients or, just the readers, my subscribers.
That's so interesting. Let me just stop there. There are a lot of things that wouldn't have happened without the newsletter. I like that. And I want to hear more examples if you have them, because when you're not doing it, you don't know what's not happening. You just know that nothing's happening.
Yes.
So, right there, I'm sure there's like a bias named after this. I think it's actually absence blindness. We can't see what's not there. That's one of my favorite biases. But tell us what you mean by there are a lot of things that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, so I mean, some very basic things like I've gotten replies before to newsletters where maybe I'll link a podcast episode that I was on and somebody will say, "Hey, I would love to have you come guest on my podcast."
Right.
Those are opportunities that maybe wouldn't have happened without the newsletter. I had a conversation. So, someone who I really admire in this space that I take a lot of newsletter advice from is Adriana Tika. And I did a workshop with her and had a strategy session after. And during the strategy session, she was one of my first subscribers. And she said, "I'm curious, why do you never link your services in your newsletter?" I was
Mm,
like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, you talk about your strategy sessions, you talk about these things." She was like, "But you don't make it super easy for people to just click and schedule them." And I was like, "Oh." So I started doing it, and lo and behold, like last year, I'm pretty sure it was 13 people that I had who scheduled strategy calls directly from links in my newsletter. And
so,
some of them told me it was because of the newsletter that they did it, and just
okay.
the fact that it helps keep top of mind. So those are a few of the examples that have come from that.
So I want to know the reason you weren't linking to your actual services. Is it because you didn't think of it or because you didn't want to be too direct or bold or salesy or anything like that?
I think it was a combination. So I think there were some missed opportunities where it's like, oh, well, that would have been a natural place to link it that would have made sense.
Mhm.
But then there was some of this. So I'm a chronic over deliverer. It's something I've definitely been working on in my business, right? Where I do believe in providing value to people. But I think it was sort of this, it was self defeating at one point because I was providing so much value, but I wasn't giving people the opportunity to then follow up and get more of what they needed. And so I was seeing it maybe sort of as salesy instead of as helpful, which is
Right.
really what it is when people have a problem and you can solve it for them. And if you tell them and make it easy so they know how you can help them solve it, right, then that benefits both of you. So I think some of it was mindset and some of it was just a lack of strategy.
Right. I love that. All right. So we still don't really know anything about your newsletter. So pretend I know nothing and tell us, what is your newsletter? What do you include? How often? Does it have a name? Anything you can tell us.
Absolutely. Yes. So, like I said, issue 95 is going out next week. And I literally just named it with the last issue, 94. So it is called Messaging Simplified.
Okay,
Um,
wait. Let me just stop you there because this is one of those things that gets in people's way. I can't do a newsletter because I don't know what to call it. And you had literally 93, I want to call them episodes, issues without a name. How do you explain that? Did it matter? Talk more about that.
so it mattered to me. Like I spent so much time perseverating over this. I have so many friends that were like probably like about to block me from texting them because I'd be like, "What about this name? What about this name?" And luckily they're still friends. But it was just this mental block. Again, I felt like I had to have it just absolutely perfect. And which is silly because I've seen plenty of people who have newsletters who then shift their name, tell you
Hmm.
they've shifted their name, and nobody thinks anything of it. So
Yeah.
I do think it mattered more to me than it did to other people. That being said, I think it's helpful. I know there are some newsletters that have names, especially if they tell you what they do, and it does make it a little bit easier to maybe refer those newsletters,
Hmm.
but it should absolutely not be something that stops you from sending it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all about removing the obstacles first, and then we can figure things out later. So I just love your 93 issues without a name.
I need to channel you more because when I did first start on LinkedIn, like you were always in my ear, like just experiment, just try. And now I need to just remember, like it's not that big of a deal. All the
It
things
really
that
isn't.
really are.
It really isn't. Okay,
Yeah.
tell us more.
So I send it weekly. It comes every Tuesday morning. I
Wow.
send it out. It's a longer form newsletter. But for me, it's sort of like I like writing. I like being nuanced and thinking through it. It takes a bit of time, but I think it's well worth it because the other big learning I've had, I'm not answering your question, I'll get back to it.
That's okay.
The other big learning I've had is like the newsletter is one asset among all your assets. And it needs to be I've learned how to be better about integrating it and making it part of like the ecosystem of my content. But yeah, so I send it once a week. And really, it's meant for people to gain insights into figuring out maybe what the disconnect potentially is. So sometimes, a lot of people, they feel like, what, I'm doing all the things, but it's not feeling effective. And then they just layer more tactics on it. And so I help them think through the strategic piece of, is it your messaging? Is it your positioning? Is it the tactical piece? And help them find that disconnect so that the marketing they do does match their expertise. It helps, earn trust faster and makes it easier for the right buyers to say yes, essentially. So the topics are usually either around messaging and positioning or around copywriting or about building trust.
And where do the ideas come from? I mean,
So this
weekly is a lot. So, like, how do you come up with all those ideas? I know that's what my people are thinking.
Yeah. So, and this is the part that I feel like I finally just figured out. I'll be perfectly honest. I would say around issue 40, maybe 45, I really thought about giving up because I didn't, again, have a plan. And so every week I was like, well, what am I going to write about? And then it was really stressful and I'm finishing it, Monday night, Tuesday morning, sending it out and never really feeling great about what I shipped. So I knew I needed a better strategy. And so what I've really done is I've been more strategic now about, as I map out my goals for the year, I align my content with them. So like right now, one of the things that I just did is updated the process for the website audits that I do. And so ultimately, I've created this arc of emails. Instead of thinking about it as an isolated newsletter, I think about, okay, well, what is the next offer that I want to lead people toward? So in this case, the one that's going out Tuesday is number 3 of 5 that I have planned that help people understand if the copy audit that I offer is a service that would be helpful to them. And so each one kind of layers on the next. That's been incredibly helpful for me because now I have this outline planned out. I know where I'm headed with it, and each one is building off the previous one. So that's really been a huge game changer for me.
And this connects back to something I heard you say a few minutes ago that will probably be its own podcast episode, is your content ecosystem. I don't want to get too in the weeds about that, but I feel like you're talking about that here also. And so this idea of, here's my goal. I want to sell more of X. So my content needs to support that and educate people about what it is and especially why they need it so that they can click on that link and say, yes, I will buy a strategy call, right?
Exactly. And then making sure that, I was really bad. I think we all know it's ideal to repurpose content, but then like figuring out what does that actually look like. And so, I mean, this is a great place where I do use AI, where I say like, this is my offer. This is the plan. Here's the series of emails that I have laid out. And then I'll, put in my newsletters that I've written and think through about like, what might my LinkedIn strategy look like based off of this? Or what are things I might talk about when I'm guesting on a podcast episode so that everything's related and I'm not constantly reinventing the wheel, which is a lot of what I was doing before.
Okay, so now they're listening and they're thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to do that. How long does that take her?
I mean, I think like anything else, it's going to take longer in the beginning. And I think you just have to trust the process. For me now, when I was about to give up, they were taking me 4 to 5 hours to write. That was way too long. Now I get them done, like fully ready to ship in usually 2 hours or less. But again, keep in mind, mine are longer form. Mine are generally about 1,200 words. Yours don't need to be that long. So if they were shorter, I could easily cut that time. But for me, it's that time is so well spent, not just in ROI, right? Like it's great when somebody schedules a session, but when you're writing your newsletters, you're having to really think through all the parts of your offer, all the parts of what you really need to convey to your readers. And it gives you so much clarity all the way around. And again, it saved me time on now I'm not thinking about, well, what do I post on LinkedIn today? Or what do I, post about here? I'm thinking about, okay, I have this whole plan in mind. I've written this newsletter. How can I take pieces of this and use that to quickly generate a post for LinkedIn? So the time is longer initially, but it gets, quicker as you figure out a process, and it saves time in other places.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I've heard people say, and this has been my experience too, is that by creating all this content and thinking through everything, especially the pain points and the problems I'm trying to solve, I gain confidence. I imagine you gain confidence about yourself and what you offer and your services and what you know. Often I find people didn't realize they knew so much until they wrote it in a newsletter. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes it's about and sometimes it does the other thing, right? It highlights some gaps too of, hey, maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
something I want to look into a little bit more or learn about more, something I can refine. But I think for me, I'm all about customer insights and really just deeply knowing and understanding your audience. And when I'm writing my newsletters, sometimes if I go to write something and I can very quickly talk about how this is showing up in their day to day, then I know I have a really solid understanding of my potential buyer. But when I'm writing issues and I've got to think back through or go back through call transcripts, it helps me know and again clarify just sort of this, is there some more research I might need to do around my audience to have those understandings of what are their pain points? What's the real reason they're choosing to buy?
Mhm. And one of the biggest, I would say, pain points my people have about the newsletter and the biggest obstacle is the voice in the back of their head. I want to know if you've ever had this that says, "Ugh, why would they want to hear from me? I don't have anything original. I don't have anything interesting to say."
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely. And the other thing I hear too is I don't want to bother people.
Hmm.
But I think one thing to remember is people are choosing to read your newsletter.
Hmm.
Especially if you're on a platform where they are intentionally, right? Like they're subscribing to your newsletter, they are choosing to open it, which means they want to hear from you. So right away, I think that can alleviate that stress or that worry. And then, I think the other thing is it's like with any of your marketing, you want to attract the people that are the right people who need to hear your message. And if what you're saying isn't helpful to them, they'll unsubscribe. And that's okay. That's not a personal reflection of you. It just might not be the message that they need to hear in the moment.
Right.
But I think, it's if they didn't think you had something valuable to say, they wouldn't have signed up for it in the first place.
I agree. And I also don't care if they read it. I don't care if they delete it. I just want them to see me in their inbox every other week on in my situation.
Yeah. I mean, that's another great point because that's the other thing is they stay top of mind. And actually, this is something that happened recently as I was looking to hire someone for a service. And I reached out to some other women I know and I said, hey, I need somebody for this. Do you know anybody? And one of them said, didn't you refer so and so to me for that? And I was like, oh my gosh. But this person had fallen completely off my radar because they
Hmm.
stopped sending a newsletter. I just wasn't seeing them places. And we think that we're bothering people, but really we're just reminding them, hey, when you're ready, I'm here.
Exactly. Because out of sight is out of mind. Totally.
100%.
Oh my God. I like to say, if I put the Oreos up on the top shelf, I'm going to totally forget they're there. And that's the good news.
I love that. That's a perfect analogy.
All right. But let's talk a little bit about the mechanics because I noticed that you use Kit, formerly Convert Kit. Talk to us about how you put it together, the logistics and all that.
Yeah, this is I mean, really, it's funny as I'm talking through this, thinking of how much progress I've actually made in the past few months on this.
Exactly.
So I just finally set up a template in there. So that has saved a massive amount of time too.
Hmm.
So I've got my template, and I would say prior to even getting it into Kit, and this is something that might be really helpful to people who've either written a few issues and are thinking through like, I don't really know what the framework is, because this was something else for me. I would go to write it, and every week it would sort of be different. One thing that I did is I input all of my either favorite issues that I wrote or the ones that got the most replies or I knew sold services. I put them all into Claude and I asked it to look for the patterns and trends. and to help me think through what are the things I'm consistently doing in this newsletter and help me think through a format. So now that has sped up my process so much because I have a framework for my newsletters. And so I have that set up in Kit in the template as well. And then, another thing that kept me kind of from the beginning feeling like I couldn't start is I got all this advice, but well, you have to segment your list and you have to have these tags and you have to have these automations. And I didn't really have any of that set up until recently, to be perfectly honest. So now I've gotten much more strategic within Kit about making sure I have, one welcome sequence for the people who subscribe based on LinkedIn. They have the creator network where people can recommend you, but those are generally people who that's the only place they've ever seen you, that you need to build a little more trust with them in the welcome sequence. So I have automation set up for that. And then I'm just starting to get a little more strategic about making sure that I'm tagging people and building out this kind of database so that as I can get more strategic and set up more of these automations, that I already have these lists kind of built.
All right. And just for the record, I do none of that. I just send my newsletter every 2 weeks to all the people. And because I can hear already people are being like, oh no,
yeah,
I'm not going to be able to do that. What's an automation? What's a welcome series? I mean, obviously we know what a welcome series is, but like there are just all of these things people want to grab onto and say, oh no, I can't do it because of that. I can't do it because of that. And again, I'm just here to remove the obstacles and tell you that I don't do any of that.
Yeah. And I want to remind them too, right? I didn't start doing that until probably January, February of this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been sending it since May of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And it has not stopped me from nurturing relationships, from making sales, from clarifying my own thinking. So yeah, absolutely. And I think if you do get to a point, that's not a one size fits all approach anyway. Not everybody needs to do that. And so that's another thing is I think we overgeneralize advice, or we hear things that, people are doing who have lists of tens of thousands of people. And so, yeah, their approach needs to be a little bit different.
And that begs the question, if you want to share approximately what's the size of your list?
Yeah, so it's not a huge list. I have around 550 people on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken me some time to grow to that. I've actually right now intentionally not done a ton to try and grow more at this point because I was working through figuring out all of these processes. And I am happy to actively unsubscribe people on my list. If they're not opening it, I'll unsubscribe them just because I know, cost is a factor for some people too. You pay for your subscribers. To me, it's less about the number of people on your list and more of, do you have the right people on your list?
Mm-hmm.
And do you have engaged people on your list?
And you said you stopped actively soliciting or going after pursuing subscribers. But when you go back to that, what will you do? What's your plan?
Yeah. So, and that's actually kind of the next phase. So I still do, I will say, I post on LinkedIn fairly regularly, and I'll still often put a link to a newsletter in there or in the comments. So I'll get some subscribers that way. But what I am doing, what's been really helpful is figuring out how can I collaborate with other people in my space so that we can create either, something that's mutually beneficial to each of us. So I've got other people I know who write newsletters to a similar audience. And sometimes we'll just put a little, 2 or 3 sentence blurb promoting each other's newsletters inside our own. And so I have a list of more people to reach out to do that as well. I also do workshops and speaking, and that's a place where I am actively thinking through resources that would be helpful that I can provide to people, or they can just subscribe straight to the newsletter, but that also helps get them on my list. And then just putting out there, lead magnets, things like that. Again, these are things that I think are great strategies at some point, but start with the lower lift ones. So for me, it was starting with, hey, I'm starting a newsletter. Would you be willing to put a link to it in yours? And that really helped me get some, probably my first, after I got my initial 25 people who signed up right away, I think that's probably how I grew to that first 100 the quickest.
Mm-hmm. Love that. 2 more questions, and this is super helpful. You mentioned the lead magnet, and I know you sent me 2 different links for sign up, one with a lead magnet and one without. just talk about that distinction. And then, so I don't forget, I'm going to ask you about a LinkedIn newsletter.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have just the landing page to my newsletter. That's what's posted on LinkedIn. That's what generally when I do those cross promotions I talked about, if we're just recommending each other's newsletter, that's what's in there. I do have different lead magnets that depending on where it is that I am speaking. So, for example, I just gave a workshop on how to take your brand story and tell it across your website. And two of the things that I mentioned in there was one is how you can use case studies as part of that story. And then another one that I talked about was we talked about how you pair testimonials with copy to help tell your story. And so I have a lead magnet that's also how do you get compelling testimonials? So those made sense in that context. So that's what I provided. If I'm guesting on a podcast and we're talking about something and I have a lead magnet that would be helpful to the audience, then that's something that I'll share then as well. But it took me a long time to get to that place where I even had anything. And then I realized I had it all sitting there. I just took a couple extra minutes to package it up and create a form for it, really.
Right. All right. And then the last question really is about like which platforms to put your newsletter on, because you're using Kit. And I noticed also that you basically have a blog that's called Newsletter on your website. And I'm asking you also about, do you have a LinkedIn newsletter? So just talk a little bit about the where of it all.
So I started off using Kit. And what I started doing earlier this year is I literally just copy my newsletters over and I post them on my website. Like you said, it looks just like a blog post. Mm-hmm. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One is when I share the links later, I want to be able to send people directly to my website. I also know that it's better overall when you're thinking about like SEO or AI search intent that it's on, kind of the real estate that I own. That is also why I started in Kit, is because, social media is great. All of these things are great, but your website, your newsletters, those are platforms that you own. And so I am a big fan of moving people off those platforms when you can. That being said, I am actually starting my LinkedIn newsletter next month.
Why?
And there are two purposes for that. So one is a goal of that is going to be to drive people to my email list. So it'll be different content. I think where people go wrong is when they're posting the same content everywhere. And then people are like, well, why should I subscribe to this list? Or if I'm already seeing the same thing right here. So LinkedIn, you can just get in front of more people. LinkedIn newsletters will often get a massive amount of subscribers. So it's a great way to get yourself in front of a lot of people. And so I would say it's also less stressful. You don't have to worry about all the, you write the thing and you hit post on it essentially. So I would say that's always a great first start. But my ultimate goal is to provide the value there and then move people over to my regular newsletter.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I also recommend LinkedIn as a place for a starter newsletter. And then if you get beyond that, then you can do all the other things that you're talking about, which is great.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm just doing it kind of backward, but I think it's still going to be something that will be valuable and will help drive. And then it's also less of a, I don't have to pay extra for that newsletter. Yeah. It's less of an investment and it's more of I can play around, see how it works. And, I know this isn't the topic, but really more and more, if you want to show up in AI search results, LinkedIn is one of the number one places that is cited. And so that is also another, kind of motivator to put more things on there.
Yeah. So I'm just making a note to myself that our next podcast episode, Stacy, is going to be about your content ecosystem, because to me, that is what I mean when I talk about connecting the dots of your marketing tools or your marketing assets. And I think you're doing that beautifully. And it does take time and it kind of evolves by itself, but you have to do it intentionally. in my opinion. So I want to hear more about that, and maybe you'll even be further along with it when we talk next. How does that sound?
That's perfect, because now it also gives me a little kick in the pants to do some of the things that I've been wanting to do.
That's right. We might even schedule it before we hang up. All right. Tell the people where they can find you and your newsletter.
Yeah. So, well, obviously I've mentioned LinkedIn quite a few times. So that is a great place where they can find me. The handle is Copy by Stacy, and you can subscribe to my newsletter on LinkedIn as well. I think I gave you the link as well to my newsletter that they can subscribe to directly from there. And those are the two best places.
All right. And just give us the URL for your website.
Yes.
Verbally,
thank you.
so people have it. Yeah.
And that's also another place I was just thinking that they can sign up to. It's on the newsletter page and then also in the footer. So it's my name. It's STACYELECZKO.com.
Right. Not one of those easy ones.
Not at all.
But that's fine. Thank you for spelling it. All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Stacy. I really appreciate you sharing again. And there will be more to be continued, as my 88-year-old mother likes to say.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you for having me. And I'm definitely looking forward to the next conversation.
Beautiful. Me too. So here's my challenge to you. Will you take whatever inspiration or motivation my conversation with Stacy has given you in this moment and use it to just do something you've been putting off? Will you do that? It could be your newsletter, or it could be reaching out to a dream client, or going to a networking event that you've been dreading. Whatever it is, please just do it. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll share your newsletter as an excellent example, and maybe even invite you to be a guest on this podcast. Why not? So if you want my help figuring any of this out, take advantage of my free mentoring session. You can find that and lots more resources, including my simplest marketing plan, at marketing-mentor.com. So enjoy, and I'll see you next time.